Welcome back to Meeting of the Mind.
Kind of helping him out.
Oh, good. What have you guys been doing? Yeah.
Well, we've been wrestling it. We have a little place we can go to, and just us two and us three. I mean, and then yeah. I mean, it always ends up in a fight. Somehow, some way. That's good.
That's good. Yeah, we were telling everyone's got to still find ways, be creative to train. I mean, that's good if you have a training partner, a built-in training partner, like I had my brother, that's good. Or if you work out with your dad, if your dad's good enough, you could do that.
Yeah.
But
or your dad stalls a lot. That's what I do.
Oh, good stuff. Thanks for jumping on the show. I wanted to get your take on, because I know you always give great information. I remember we saw you at the Pennsylvania Coaches Convention. I remember we were taking notes the whole time. It was phenomenal. Get your take on mentally preparing. How do you tell your kids to mentally prepare for their matches?
Well, I was thinking about this today, and what I was going to talk about is verbiage, because I know when I was training, a lot of that when I was growing up, I responded to a lot of negativity. My brother was very negative on me, and that's just the way he was, and it did help me at the time, and later on in my career, I feel like it became detrimental to me, and I'd always tell myself, man, I stink, or you're terrible, and I remember Bruce Burnett one time, he said, hey, you keep telling yourself that, and that's what you're going to be. So one of the things I try to change is, and I would lose my mind in practice. I would like, if I got taken down, oh my gosh, well, it's great to be a competitor, but it's also, detrimental to you when every time something like that happens, you lose focus, right? And so for me, I would say that I wanted to tell you guys that controlled intensity, I started using controlled intensity because I wanted to stay intense, but little words like that made a difference for me. In my practices, when I thought I was losing it, if I'd be at the Lumber Training Center training, all of a sudden I'd start, getting frustrated, and I'd be like, controlled intensity, right. And then just little things like that. My son, I was going to talk about him this year. Like, one of the things we talked to him about, he didn't like controlled intensity because it made him it slowed him down, right? It made him feel like he was not wrestling, just did do it for him. So what we did was we changed it to, hey, just as simple as move my feet. So in practice, he's moving his feet. One of the things we also had was, being, like leg defense, you're sitting there as a coach and you're screaming, do this, do that. And they're like, and if you just say, hey, be stingy, and it changed his whole psyche. When I told him to be stingy, he didn't give up points. You didn't have to tell him everything to do. They already know that. And so those are huge points. And I think communicating and letting individuals know your language, your wrestling language, is huge in understanding and getting the most out of your athletes. One of the other things I would say is, you watch my son in the PA this year, he breathes, because he start getting, things get tough, you just got to breathe. And once you just say little words like breathe, he's fine. So we started implementing these things in practice, because in practice is where it matters. And,
right.
That's where most of it has to be done.
Yeah, no, I love that. We tell our guys that too. That if you don't do it in practice, forget about it. You're not going to be able to all of a sudden just whip those emotions together on the spot in a match. Or if you do, you got lucky. You're not able to replicate it in the next match.
Against the highest level of opponent, and this is what I learned for myself. Your reactions. I lost 3 years of my life, and what I mean by that is wrestling. I was wrestling Zeke Jones, an Olympian world champ. And when I first got out of college, and I always would lose my mind and be, I was being aggressive, but for stupidity, right? I was giving up points here and there and losing focus during the match. And once I started telling myself in practice, and I did that in practice all the time, which carried over in the highest matches. So what I started telling myself in practice is, hey, breathe, controlled intensity. I use those words, and really honestly, after that, I was world champ. That 1998, I became world champ because I really believe I changed the way I talk to myself. One of the things Kevin Jackson used to say to me all the time, I'd be like, coach, too big, too strong, and, just positive words instead of, beating myself down. And it changed. You don't go around being cocky, but you're going around saying, hey, man, I'm going to get this dude, and it's all about how you talk to yourself and how you talk to your athletes. I really believe that, and your training. And one of the things I would tell you is I always get my wrestlers as tired as I can, and then have them drill technique, and that's what they're going to do in the highest level match. So if they're so tired, how they're finishing and shooting and setting up people at that point is how they're going to react in the national finals or the state finals, whatever it is.
Yeah. No, that's great. I like that. Yeah, getting them tired. So now you have the discipline. So now you got to make sure you're making good decisions. Like anyone could do in the beginning of the match. Yeah.
Right. So whatever your habits are, right? So we're trying to create great habits during when you're least, when your faculties are gone, everybody gets tired. So if you can create great habits during that time, and your mental focus is, when I get to, like today, we were wrestling today, and one of the things we were going over was, once you get to the leg, that's half the battle. Why it wasn't finishing, Dash wasn't finishing, and I was like, man, you gotta get through. Once you get to the leg, that's when the good stuff happens. That's when you get mean and get tough and then I had Jackson Cowboy do it, and it was like he just he's 20 years, he just got mean on him, and that's sometimes in practice what we do in practice, it carries over, and when it does, if you're not doing those things and not making mental suggestions to yourself during practice and making adjustments, it's hard to overcome that.
What about also, what are you telling yourself once you have the leg, or when someone has your leg, because their mindset's important too? Yeah.
One of the things I tell myself is, I worked too hard to get here. And I think, especially high school to college, you have there's a big difference, because now all of a sudden these guys are actually defending. And then you got college, the world championships, and now it's on another level, because they're not only defending, they're actually counter offense, and they're actually going after you. So for me, if I got to your leg, I'm finishing. There is no doubt. All of my energy is going into that moment. And, one is, you have to train that way, but mentally, you have to really tell yourself that during those times. And I don't think I did a lot of mental imagery when I was in Clemson, when I was training for Chad Zappel, Lou Roselli. I always wrestled those guys, and I was going to tell you this. I would go in there for I wanted to wrestle like Aiken first round, and second round I had Lou Roselli, and then third round of championship I had Chad Zappel, and I'd switch it. I'd alternate it. And I always had to beat him the way I wanted to beat him that day. Sometimes it was really bad, and I would be doing motion stance the whole time. If I didn't beat it, if the clock ran out, and I'd set the clock, and if the clock ran out and I didn't beat him the way I was supposed to, I would get tired, so I'd lose focus, right? Yeah. I didn't beat him the way I was supposed to, I'd have to start over. Well, I'm telling you right now, I was only supposed to be in there like 30, 40. Sometimes I'm there an hour and a half, because I wanted to be perfect. And and it was mental and physical, and I didn't realize what I was doing, but I was tying the two together, which is huge.
Yeah, definitely. They always work together. And like I said, building that into the practice. Now, what do you tell your sons in between the tournament, like in between rounds, recovering energy, both physically and mentally, energy management?
Yeah. You mean after the match is over?
Yeah, and then they still have enough. Yeah, well, in between matches. Yeah.
Right, in between matches, yeah. Recovery's huge. Fuel in your body, you're not worrying about anything else. A perfect example, not worried about, who's on the other side of the bracket. Doesn't matter. It's only the guy in front of you. In high-level matches, I always say, hey, we get off the mat as quick as we can. We fall into pins. We fall into these things. So if you're working toward if you're doing the little things right, you'll fall into them. You don't have to look for them. They'll happen. And so those are little things. And then also just, getting off their legs, make sure they're resting, not standing up, walking around a lot, and just preparing for the next match. And a lot of times, like my Wyatt, Dash doesn't like watching video, right? And I didn't either. And so I would always have Bruce Burnett watch video for me. And I would be like, okay, because I would start sweating and make the guy better than what he was. But he's like, hey, because I would be like, man, dude, this guy's good. And then he's like, he's not wrestling you. He's not getting his head pulled on for 5 minutes. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. And but so then he started just telling me, I always wanted to know if he had what leg he led, because that's the leg I was going to attack. If he had a trick move, because I got beat one time with one guy that had just an arm throw and threw me. I went to Siberia, and it was over in 20 seconds. It was embarrassing. 30 hours, and it was whatever. But, yeah, so if he has a trick move and if he's in shape, that's all I need to know.
Yeah. And then how would Well, now if the person was in shape, how does that affect it?
Well, it just told me that I was going to have a battle on my hands. You know what I mean? And that once I did get to the leg, or once it got past, especially when I went international, mainly that was, you know, when that was happening. But once I got past the 3-minute mark, well, he's still going to be fighting, you know, and that's not always the case against every foreigner you wrestle, right? Especially if you have a lead.
Yeah, that's true. And now, what kind of big mistakes do you see? Like, what are some of the most common mental mistakes you see wrestlers make, whether it's in matches, in between rounds of a tournament, their approach towards wrestling? What would you say there?
Well, I think, like, in matches, I see people just, because things aren't happening fast enough for them, they're not patient. They're not winning positions. They're wrestling technique. I always say paint by numbers. You know, wrestling's such an art, right? And it's such a mental game, and it's also such a feel, right? And you have to learn how to wrestle. You got to feel wrestling, right? And so my whole philosophy is position wrestling. Everything else comes from that. I don't look for technique. I put the wrestler in their position, and wherever I want them, and they're reacting. If they're constantly reacting from me, I'm gonna fall into whatever they give me. So most of the wrestlers' common mistakes are, I got a great single leg, well, this guy's been studying film, and so now we have to create a way to you have a great single leg, but you don't just shoot it because he's blocking you with his head. So now we have to figure out another way to get to that single leg, or if he's giving you a high C, take it, you know? And then sometimes if he is giving you a high C, maybe it's too good to be true, and he's really good at sitting in the corner. So make sure that you feel a wrestler, and that right there is important. Feeling and understanding, like I can look at kids and I know what they're good at and even if I haven't watched them, just because I wrestle so much, and I know their body types, and if they're really good, they have to be good in those areas, right? And so, you know, Nick Simmons, you don't really want to go underneath on Nick Simmons. I mean, I would I would tell anybody that. It's just you look at his body, look at his frame.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's got a lot of leg there, so you don't really want to go high C on him. You want to go backside on him, you know, snap him down, those type of things. So I think a lot of it is just the wrestlers and coaches. Sometimes we're not wrestling positions. We're not focusing on the little things and instead we're worried about the technique of it all. And technique's important, and where you put your hand and what you do. But the most important part is winning positions. If my level's better than yours, and I stay and I'm more focused and more conditioned to stay in my position, I'm gonna beat you.
All right, so it's staying in good position as well as winning those positions. So in practice, how do you work that more? So it's more finding like what are the most common positions kids will be in, or based on their technique with
Yeah. Well, I always work front headlocks, right? Because how many times everybody's in a front headlock, whether you're shooting in or whether you're getting stepped down. Sometime in the match, you're in a front headlock. And as coaches, I mean, I used to not do it either. You always do single legs, double legs. Everybody does the same thing. But how much do you work in front headlocks, right? I remember coming back from Penn State one time. We were coming back, and Troy Sutherland was the coach at the time. And he goes, what do you think we should work on? You know, and we had wrestled Iowa. I go, well, I don't know, but I think we should work on front headlocks. Recovery from front headlocks, because that's for 90% of the takedowns we got beat on. And so I think those are areas of concentration. I call them AOCs. And, you know, I like doing situation wrestling, single legs, high Cs, doubles, getting in front headlock position and wrestling in those positions, because you really see how, you know, half the battle is getting there. So if you're wrestling and you do six or 10 sets of single legs right in a row, when me and Eric Guerrero, we wrestled a little bit, and we would go, you know, I'd go 6 in a row singles, he'd go 6 in a row singles, 15, 20-second goes, boom, and then high C, and then front headlock, then double legs, even double legs, you know, and then we would then we'd go, okay, down by 1, and we'd do 6 of them for each one of us, or up by 2, you know, and just use that kind of game plan. So, you know, really honestly, just in practice, I think the way you get it too is no soft hands. I always say no soft hands. Sometimes our hands are just laying there, and I never rest in other people's positions.
Right.
You know, that's important. You can't rest in people's – if you're resting, you need to be outside in your thumbs, and after you're resting, but you cannot hang in people's positions. Right.
Yeah, we got that heavy in college. We learned that, right? The big difference between high school and college is supposed to just kind of laying hands over the top of them. It's got to be active.
Yeah, that's right. You got to be active, and you got to control the ties, right? You got to control the inside ties. Everybody knows that, but it's just I think once again, the biggest thing I see is when wrestlers just shoot to shoot, or they attack. When I say attack, it could be a shot. I always said it could be a shot. It could be a snap down. It could be an angle. but you're always attacking, staying on the offense one way or another. Counter tap the guy as you're attacking. If you're like Wyatt, he shoots a lot, right? So people are going to get to his legs. I mean, because he's attacking, Right. I love that, because then what you do is you work on being stingy, having the greatest defense in the world. So if somebody does get your legs, when I was 35 years old, I wrestled in the world championships, and my number one takedown that year, I guarantee you, was a down block fly. Yeah. I mean, I put so much pressure on the guy, I hardly ever shot, and then they would shoot on me, and then I'd run around them. So, it was pretty easy.
Yeah. And you're right, guys just don't put as much time in on the front headlock position in practice. They just don't.
Without a doubt. I mean, as a whole, think about it. Everyone's in there during some time in the match. Whether you're shooting in and you're stuck there and you got to peek out, or you got a sucker drag, and then also just scoring in front headlock. If I get you in the front headlock, I need to score in that position. Yeah.
So really creating that urgency.
If a referee, I always say this too, if a referee let you start in on a single or let you start in a front headlock, wouldn't you be pretty excited? I mean, when you think about it like that, I would be like, yeah, this is awesome, right? So I don't know why we don't work there. So.
No, that's right. And then underneath the front headlock, are you thinking more like offensive, like I'm going to score from here, like you said, sucker drag, different things, or is it just more get to your feet and come out of the position?
Well, I've never seen that's the thing. Yeah, no, exactly what you just said though. Like today, I was watching my kids. They defend. My thing is, I always either reestablish sucker drag, like you said, I'm staying offensive minded, or I am building my position, grabbing hands, circling out of it. But as I'm circling out of it, I'm going already back to another attack, so I don't fully come out. And I think sometimes as wrestlers, we fully come out of the position. Yeah. I always say it's called staying in the game, right? Michael Leitner used to be like, stay in the game, because he would fake so much. I told him, I go, you're faking so much, I'm just going to stand there. I got to wait till you stop faking. Because, I go, but you're not letting me wrestle. And I go, you got to stay in the game, don't pull yourself out. So those are little things that you tell yourself.
I like that. That's important. And like you said, it's the words you use. It's important that you have those cues that bring you back. Now, you give these high-level examples. Okay, so maybe Kevin Jackson says to say this, or Bruce Burnett says to say that. So you might try that with the kid and say, hey, does this work for you, or do we need to use something else?
That's right.
So it's like the only thing that would be wrong is not having a plan. But as long as you have a plan, you're good. And that works for you, right?
Yeah, and as a team, as a coach, you have an overall verbiage. Like I always say, get your head on them. They know what that means. But everyone's different, right? Wyatt's different to me. Wyatt doesn't want to be told controlled intent. He doesn't want to hear those words. That's not good for him. And and he told me that, and I loved it, because I'm like, okay, what works?
Now you know.
He goes, yeah. I go, what works for you? And he goes, tell me to move my feet. Boom, head and hands. I always say, move your feet, head and hands. So, I mean, you have to have that communication dialogue too with your athletes, right? And them too, both ways.
Yeah, no, I think that's big, and addressing it in practice as opposed to just the day of on a match. A lot of people just leave it a chance.
Yeah, you can't. It's too late then, man. Especially if you're wrestling the best guys, and that's what we're talking about. We're trying to get these kids to, realize their dreams. You're wrestling someone that has a coach that cares just as much as your coach does, and you guys have put just as much vested interest in succeeding. So if everything's equal, the little things matter. If everything's equal, I always say, if everything's equal, your diet. Don't lose the match at the scale. If everything's equal, did you get proper rest? Were you living right? My you've seen on my website, philosophy is consistency wins, and I've told you, I said that at PA that one time, is basically, hey, over time, if you do the right things and you're committed, not perfect, but committed, then you have that chance to overcome everyone. But if everything's equal, if me and whoever I'm wrestling is equal, then the little things are going to come into play, and that's how you live your life.
Sure. How about right before going out there to wrestle? So not your warm up, but like the 10 minutes right before you step out there, in terms of getting yourself both mentally and physically ready. What do you usually recommend guys to do?
Well, me, I was different. I wanted to be told I was the greatest in the world. And I wanted a hype man. I wanted Kevin Jackson to be too big, too strong. You're the baddest man on the planet. You trained too hard. You out-trained everyone. I need to hear those things.
Yeah.
My Dash does not want to hear any of that. He's more like Nick Marable was like, hey man, what do you think we're going to go afterwards? I'm like, when he first did that, the first time I was coaching him, I'm like, hey dude, you're giving me a panic attack, dude. You know this guy, I go, you know this guy wants to kill you, right? And he goes, yeah, coach. And then we talked afterwards, and he's like, coach, I don't do well with that. I go, okay. So then we were overseas one time in Turkey, and I forget where we were at. I think it was Turkey. And Nick goes, Zeke Jones was on the trip, and he was the national coach. And we were there, and I'm like, hey, Nick, you made weight. Let's just go home. We're done. We're done. We don't need it. We already made weight. That was half the battle. And Zeke was like, what? I go, hey, man, trust me. This works for this kid. And, he ended up winning the tournament. So, I mean, good things happen. You gotta be able to adjust. I mean, that's an extreme case.
Yeah.
Nick was an extreme. He was just really wanted to be happy, wanted to feel good before he went out there. I don't know how he did it, but he did, and he wrestled really well, like in those circumstances. So. Yeah.
And do you think to physically get them ready, do you think it helps for them to be drilling with someone, like get some hands on you a little bit before you step out there? Because in practice, usually you're drilling before you go live. And then in matches, there's no drilling up until like an hour before,
Always, especially when you've seen it in college and even high school, I'm sure. I haven't watched too many high school matches, but I would think that, you warm up right after you make weight, 15 minutes afterwards.
Yeah.
And then you got about an hour, depending on where you're at in the lineup, what weight they start at. You have to get I always threw water on my face, go to the bathroom, smack myself around a little bit, and then, even do some push-ups and hand fight a little bit. And that's about it, Not too much, but just enough where you're alert.
Yeah.
Because you're just sitting around, and your body needs that.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was thinking because it's like if you're always usually in practice, you drill before you go live. So you want to kind of mimic those conditions. A lot of guys you see, they don't touch another human being between their warm up and when they step out on the mat. And they wonder why they don't feel good until the second or third period. You weren't ready.
Well, that's what happened like this year with my son. One of his matches, I'm not going to talk which one, but he said the guy wasn't warming up. And right after he warmed up, he texted me and said, I got this dude. Because he goes, he's not warmed up. And see, for that, even if it mentally did something to my son, and made him, it was like, boom, I got this dude, and that, you don't want somebody saying that. You don't want somebody feeling that. So, I mean, I think it's just I wouldn't want that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, winning the psychological battle. Not that that's the main reason why you do it, but that's an ancillary benefit, right?
It is what it is, man. If a guy sees you out there working hard and he knows you're in shape and, it's in his mind, you put doubt in his mind. And that's part of it. I mean, part of this is doubt, right? Like self-doubt. And I think you've always seen my post. I'm a big believer in training, of course, but I'm a big believer in what you guys are doing and how you're helping athletes. I think it's amazing. I think that you're even having sports dietitian. I had one at West Virginia. It was amazing. Just making sure that people are doing, like I said, if everything's equal, how are we going to catch them? And if we're beyond, like as me as a coach, how am I going to catch Iowa or Penn State? I can't if I'm not doing the extra, because if they're out recruiting me, if I can't get this recruiter, I get this, how are we going to catch them? And so that's what you got to ask yourself as a coach. And, and actually tell your kid, I tell my wrestlers, I'm like, okay, we're here. You're ranked this. How are we going to catch them? Okay. Are we going to train this summer? What's your plan? And kind of put it on them and let them come up with the plan. And then you can adjust it and work with them.
Yeah. Right. So at least that at the end of the day, when your career is over, the season's over, you did everything in your power. You crossed your T's, you dotted your I's. I left no stone unturned. I don't have any regrets. It's always worse to look back and say, man, I could have done that. That stinks.
Yeah, we've all had those things, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. No, great stuff. Thank you. I really appreciate it.